Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Community Conversations. I'm Lieutenant Governor Dan McKee, and every Wednesday at 7 o'clock, we have this live broadcast about issues that are really relevant and timely during, in Rhode Island right now, especially during the COVID health crisis we're going on, the economic health crisis. And, of course, we know that there's certain activities out there that are really bringing front and center some of the racial issues that our country's been dealing with for a long time, and we want to talk about that. We're not looking to create an argument as much as let's talk about information. We're all adults, and we should be able to really air our opinions in a way that makes sense. There is a ballot question on the ballot this year that talks about a name change for Rhode Island and dropping Providence Plantations from our name and just be going by Rhode Island, which most of us refer to our state everywhere, every day, and anyways. But before we open up the conversation, I just want to lay out a couple things that we've always have talked about. One is the health crisis. We need to be following the rules. What I've been saying now to people, look, wear your mask. And if you're in an area where people are not wearing the mask, then wish them a good day, but get the hell out of there. All right? I mean, it's their, people who are not wearing masks, that's their decision. But you have a decision. Wear the mask. And if you come across a situation where people are not wearing the mask, again, wish them a good day, but run. Get out of there. All right? We got to wear our masks, social distance, wash our hands. We're not going to open our economy up unless we do. The other thing is that Restore Rhode Island grants. I'm on a 39 small business grant tour right now. I was in South Kingstown today visiting a dozen businesses talking about the Restore Rhode Island grants. And we really are encouraging our businesses that we were able to get $50 million into a grant program to help our small businesses. And Restore Rhode Island is the name of the program. And we need to have our small businesses access those dollars. If you've already been one of the 1,500 businesses that have been able to share in 12 of the 50 million, you can reapply on a very short application. A couple of the businesses that I met in South Kingstown today have done exactly that, and they're going to qualify for another matching $7, $8, $9, $20,000 potentially. We need to get that money into those communities, every community, all 39. And then finally, the education piece. We're going to be really starting to talk about education. It's certainly one of the racial issues in terms of justice and in the classroom. I've been working at this for years, but one of the main thing, it doesn't matter whether you're coming from a high income, low income, moderate income, doesn't matter if you're a minority, non-minority. Right now in Rhode Island, because of the COVID and the virtual learning, hundreds and hundreds of hours of learning time is being lost. And we got to do something about actually closing that gap. I'm recommending that 39 cities and towns do what I did when I was a mayor. I opened up a municipal education department. It goes 52 weeks out of the year. We help kids how to read, do math, music, science, art, debate, leadership, robotics. We've had an education and a pre-K going in our town for the last 13 years, and our school district is reaping the benefits of that as we are getting more improved scores. When I opened that up, we had 2 failed elementary schools in the town of Cumberland. That was back in 2007. Today, we're tracking towards being some of the very best school districts in the state of Rhode Island. But now we got to close that gap. So let's start talking seriously about these municipal education departments. And very shortly, we'll have a report. And we're teaming up with some young activists right now in the Black Lives Matter movement that are creating a PAC. And they're going to focus that PAC on education issues that has to do. Let's put people of color in front of the classrooms. Let's create certification strategies that allow those who are qualified to get their certification, reciprocation when people come from other states. Let's make sure they can get in front of our classrooms to teach our kids. Put them in the education, municipal education department so that we can fast track that option of people, that represent the communities that are being taught, that they are actually educating our kids. That's a really important thing. And I'm still holding on real tight to a performance card for every school in the state where parents, 100% of the families receive information about comparing the grades that are going home against the actual proficiency rates in our schools. You're going to be shocked and surprised in communities around the state, communities you might live in, that the proficiency rates may go from 10 to 30% on reading and math, yet A's are going home, and parents feel as though that the kids are actually doing math and reading at grade level, which is not the case. So we need to really make sure that we educate families. That's another topic. Tonight, we were going to talk about the name change on the vote, the referendum number 1 on our ballot that's already people are voting on. And there's an argument that talks about that the proposed name change ignores history. And there was an op-ed. Maybe Ben, you could bring up the op-ed. I'm kind of flashing this here, but the op-ed that was written when I was researching, Brian Stinson, a historian researcher, who makes the argument that there's not a connection between racial bias, racial discrimination, slavery, and the current name of the state, what has to do with plantations, and it doesn't feel as though there is a connection between plantations and slavery in the state. And so we have Rep. Williams with us tonight. Anastasia, Anastasia, why don't you come on? I'm trying to set this up, this discussion, and I think that we'll have Charles Roberts join us if he hasn't already been there. But Rep, thanks for being here. Charles, thank you for being here. I hope that you kind of saw my setup here about opening this discussion tonight. And I look at this as an adult conversation. This is, there's going to be people on both sides of the ledger here that are going to try to personalize it in a way that creates an argument that's you never win an argument. My dad always told me you never win an argument. You have to put the facts out. You have to deal with things. And good data equals good decisions. Bad data equals poor decisions. And so that's what we're going to try to do tonight with a couple articles that I sent you earlier in the day to take a look at. But Rep, introduce yourself, the district that you represent, a little bit about your background, I believe it's Panama, right? You've got some roots in Panama. And so just give a little introduction tonight to the people that are watching. And by the way, share this out to your friends. Very important topic. And both Charles and Rep. Anastasia Williams are, very important leaders in the state on this topic and many other areas. But go ahead, Rep. Introduce yourself, and then we'll get into the meat of the conversation.
Good evening, Lieutenant Governor, and good evening, Mr. Roberts. It's a pleasure once again to be sharing some time with both of you. My name is Anastasia Williams. I'm state representative of District Number 9 in the city of Providence. I am a military brat, but a good brat. And I am definitely an individual whose foundation growing up was one of loyalty, courage, good character, good, strong foundation. And it was an upbringing and a way of life for us. So, when my dad decided to retire from the military and come back home to Rhode Island, it was definitely a shocker that people were so disconnected per se. I sometimes compare living in Panama as being down south, when everybody will see you and greet you. They don't know you, but they'll say, hello, good morning, howdy, how you doing? So that was something that I experienced all the time. Came to Rhode Island, and it was like, not only the winters were cold, the welcoming was also cold as well. But nevertheless, I acclimated to my new home, and I love Rhode Island and been doing what I was, raised to do. It's to serve, be a public servant, to do and help out any way I can for anyone that needs it or asks for it. So
yeah, and Rep, you're a leader that really has a strong voice, and I kind of happen to like people with strong voices, and that lay out the arguments in the way you have. And I know that you're front and center on this name change issue, and I'm going to let Charles introduce himself, and then we're going to come back and then really discuss whether or not whether we agree or disagree with this writer who's saying that we're ignoring history if we get rid of the name. But and then I want to go back. I want to read a couple quotes from articles that I've also dug up that I've sent you earlier that have to do with a complicated history, highlighting slavery in South County, and then the fact that slavery persisted into the 19th century in New England. And I want to read a couple of the professors' quotes, and then hopefully we're going to be able to kind of discuss that to really zero in on the argument about changing the name, and certainly people who are watching this who have another perspective on things, please share it. But let's be respectful when we share the information. Charles, welcome. Thank you for being here. You've been here before, but also because of the many of the the projects that you're involved in, along with the Rhode Island Slave Medallion Project, and also the many other areas that you're involved in, from the brigade of the First Black Brigade that fought in the Revolutionary War. You have background on that here in Rhode Island. But give us an introduction again in terms of who you are and the type of things that you've been working on along with the Medallion Project.
Hi, how you doing there? Thank you, Lieutenant Governor. And hello there, Mrs. Representative Williams, and how you doing? Nice to see you again. I haven't seen you since I was recognized by the Congress as the Rhode Island Slave History Medallion Education Program. You were one of the 19 signers that ratified that resolution, and I want to thank you again personally for doing that. It's been a big pleasure. It's been a big help to Risham because it's given us the recognition throughout the state. We are a statewide education program. We're a place-based education program, and what we're trying to do is put medallions with QR codes that tell about the history of the locations that were involved with the slave trade, and tell the stories of those slaves. And right now we've got one at Patriots Park in Portsmouth, one at Bowen's Wharf in Newport, and thank you, Lieutenant Governor, for being there. We have one that we've just installed at Smith Castle, the Plantation Smith Castle in North Kingstown. And I must say, to have an outdoor event during this time was just fabulous. It was just, we had Narragansett there. Every time I start talking about this subject matter, I get flummoxed because it's an emotional issue.
Right.
And in history in itself shouldn't be an emotional history. It's just fact. I mean, it's a fact that 40 slaves were brought to Smith Castle, and 200 graves of slaves there. It's 150 years. I mean, Roger Williams, we know, brought freedom, and this is part of what this gentleman is talking about, the qualities of Rhode Island. He brought freedom to of religion to the United States or the colonies, but that wasn't freedom of religion for African Americans. They were slaves. They were brought there because they couldn't get after the wars. They enslaved the people that were natural to this land, the indigenous people, and sent them into slavery. Slavery is a sin. It's the economic sin of the country.
So,
and it's
Charles,
playing itself out now in what we see as the injustices that are being done through institutionalized racism throughout the United States, not just in Rhode Island.
So Brian Stinson, who wrote this op-ed, and by the way, all three of these articles are current articles coming in 2020, which I thought were important in terms of our perspective on things. And I'm going to reach out to Brian. I didn't have a chance to do that today. I don't know the gentleman, but I want to reach out to him as well. But his last comment here, and I think it would open up a conversation right now before we get into some of the quotes that I want to get to for the discussion, because I think education on this issue, as you just outlined very quickly, is really important. Most people are not recognizing that there was slavery both before and after the Revolutionary War, here in Rhode Island or in New England for that matter. But his saying falsely and mistakenly linking plantation with slavery in Rhode Island could wipe out the accomplishments of founders Roger Williams and John Clark and shred one of the most important pieces of our state's history, which, when true and accurate, should be shared by all. In this case, the name has nothing to do with slavery, period. So that's his position on it. I thought maybe just, with Rep. Williams and also Charles, just, give us your perspective on why we, and I happen to disagree with the writer here, but he's entitled to his opinion. But give us a reason why, when somebody says there's no, and I had breakfast with somebody this morning who could not make the connection between, because I don't think they realized the things that you've taught me and the things that Rep. Williams has brought out over the last several months. But give a reaction to that, and then I want to get into some of these articles that are, talking about people who really are expressing the true history that I think that we need to share. But I think first thing, respond to that article just saying that the name has nothing to do with slavery, period. That's his position right now. And by the way, go ahead, Rep.
And I will agree with his statement. However, times have changed. If we look at the dictionary from 50 years ago, 25 years ago, with certain words, they have changed. The meaning of certain words have changed. The same difference. The word plantation was about farmlands, back then. But it also represents a dark time in history. So when you talk about true and accurate history, slavery is a true and accurate situation that occurred, and in some instances still occurring today. There are going to be many people who are not willing to accept that slavery existed, that was a hurtful time in history, that it is American history. They're not going to accept, like you said, you're not going to win the argument because it is their world, and their world did not consist with the things that the same world that my ancestors lived in. They didn't deal with that hardship. They didn't deal with that. They didn't have to face with it. My question goes, when was the last time you was a Black person?
Well,
come on.
Yeah, and Charles, make comment on the Brian, Mr. Stinson's thought process here in terms of why he feels as though that there shouldn't be a name change, and then I want to get into some of the things that Rep. Williams just alluded to, but really kind of connect in some of our Rhode Island history in a way that we can't, it's not undeniable. But go ahead, Charles. First comment on the position that Mr. Stinson has taken, that the name has nothing to do with slavery, period. That's his point.
Well, first of all, I have 2 points. First of all, the word plantation and the idiom that is plantations came because the plantations that were constructed by people very popular and famous people in history, like Abraham Redwood, who created the Redwood Library and was one of the forefathers of the part of Aquidneck Island that was called Rhode Island. And then, of course, and Roger Williams, who also came here to create freedom and of liberty and religion for the colonists. These are the people that came to the United States, took the land of the indigenous people there, and claimed it for themselves. Went back to England, and Roger Williams was one of the people that did this, so that they could claim the land that was not theirs, that would belong to indigenous people, as their land, and create the plantations they needed to feed the plantations that were created through the British colony in Cuba and the islands, so that therefore they could then feed the people that they enslaved and brought to those islands and create a plantations similar to them in Rhode Island. Rhode Island, remember, was first inhabited by the people in Aquidneck Island, and then there were Indians here. The Quakers were part of this, and they took their land and kicked them off of the island itself and claimed it for themselves as the state or the colony of Rhode Island. Then when Roger Williams moved to Providence, the state, and that was the state capital at that time. Then when Roger Williams moved to Providence, Providence became the capital of Rhode Island. And that's when it became Rhode Island and the plantation, the name that we have now. Those plantations were the plantations of South County. And Ben, if you could show the picture I sent of my logo, you'll understand it visually. They were the plantations where, if you get a close up of just the image, yeah, good. If you look at this image, you'll see that the economy of the Narragansett planters, I mean, the enslaved people there raised the sheep. They raised the oh boy, it's really awful. They raised all of the goods and services that they needed to enslave the Africans that they kidnapped from Africa, brought to the islands to cut sugar so that they could make molasses and then have the Rhode Island ship captains go down there and distill the molasses into rum, then take the rum, send the rum to Africa to trade for more slaves that they brought to the islands so that they could make more sugar and bring to Rhode Island, Newport in particularly, but the coast of Rhode Island, Bristol is another place, distill it into rum, and then use it as a commodity to build the economic development of this state.
Yeah.
We use this logo so that visually you can see it. You can see the trade itself.
So Charles and Rep, I'm going to read I'd like to establish the fact that there was, as you just said, Charles, there was slavery, both Native Americans and Black, and some white potential. I have no idea, but there was slavery clearly in Rhode Island before, because I think that some people believe that slavery did not exist during the Roger Williams time frame. And but let me just read a quick. This is from the article from the Historical Society, Southern Rhode Island. It says, it's amazing to think that back in the latter 17th century and into the 18th century, Charlestown, or what would be considered Charlestown in 1738, which is, well before the Declaration of Independence, held two of the largest plantations in the state of Rhode Island, owned by two very prominent families. And it went on, and although one of the families, the Stanton family, General Joseph Stanton, our first senator to Rhode Island, would go on to perpetuate the abolition of slavery. His ancestors held slaves on their farms. Talk about, and then I'm going to talk about after the American Revolution, in terms of the history that brings us into, the 1850s or so, that we still persisted. But let's focus on the fact that there was slavery here prior to, us, issuing a Declaration of Independence. And could you give a little detail on that? And I want Rep. Williams to kind of weigh in on that comment, that right in Charlestown, plantations existed. And at one point in time, I've read that as much as 20% of the state's population was enslaved. As much as 20% of the state's population during this time frame in the late 1600s into the early 1700s, between 1680 and 1720, as much as 20% of the people who lived in Rhode Island were enslaved. So give us a little perspective on that, Charles. I know you have, background, and then I'd like to have the rep kind of weigh in on the pre-American Revolution history that we kind of give we're kind of in denial to a certain degree that Roger Williams brought many good things, but that time frame also we were dealing with the slave issue in Rhode Island. Go ahead, Charles.
Well, people like the person that wrote the article have to realize that our forefathers were flawed individuals. They really believed in a paradoxical world where they had the right to enslave others to develop their own economic advantage. They had to come up with this religious and political concept that they were better than, because they were white, because of the color of their skin, to be able to do some horrible thing like enslave, kidnap people from their land and enslave them and work them to death. The death rate in the islands for a slave was 7 years. That's why they had to keep importing them to the islands. That's why they had to keep making sugar to make rum to trade for Africans, so that they had an inexhaustible supply of free labor. And this is what he's talking about when he's talking about enslavement on large plantations, large farms, called plantations, first created by the British, and then in South County, and the one that you're talking about happens to be one of the Stantons were one of the big procurers, the Updikes the other, and the Richard Smith Castle was a plantation, and there's 200 bodies buried there, and so what would happen was they worked the slave. They had to have slaves. Slaves, if you want to look at it from the 1700s and 1600s, in their perspective, was a necessary. They didn't look at it like evil. How could you be looking at your abuse of men, women, and children as evil unless you looked at them as chattel? And that's what it was. It was the chattel slave trade. So naturally, Roger Williams, who helped enslave Indians by learning their language, actually got kicked out of Massachusetts and created Newport, Rhode Island, the little Rhodey, would naturally think that there was nothing wrong with it, because how could you be anybody a religious person of conscience and think that it was wrong?
And also, Charles, again, we're still working on this area that clarifies our history, right? I mean, that's what this op-ed was talking about, as being consistent with our history. This is really important. The King Philip's War. There was times like we were, arranging to kind of clear the land of the American Indians so they could make way for, the founders of Rhode Island, which at the time was Roger Williams and that type of thing. But after those wars, the people who are still living, they were transported to the Caribbean as slaves.
Yes, the Indians, and that's what the issue is with the Narragansetts, and were just about, and the Pequods, wiped out because they were enslaved by the colonists that this gentleman is so eager to point out were these good people that were just trying to survive. They created an institution of injustice towards a whole race of people just so that they could survive. And then they brought the rest of the colonists, white colonists, who weren't people of means like them, and got them all involved in this economic development and got them to agree to this egregious trade.
And
I just want to finish that.
Yes, I'm sorry, Charles. Go ahead.
This gentleman can't see that he is perpetuating white privilege by using this terminology. Words matter, and the word plantation is a word that is an image of people being whipped and tortured in the South. People that were thrown overboard.
Yeah, so I'm here establishing some really good historical data, and that's one of the things that concerned me about the last, that op-ed, was that during that whole op-ed, there wasn't any mention of what we just talked about, whether it had to do with the King Philip War and taking Indian, the Native Americans, sent them to the Caribbean as slaves in exchange for other economic benefit, and then also the same thing here with as much as 20% of our population at one time was actually enslaved in Rhode Island. Let me just read another. This is from the article, and then I want Rep. Williams to weigh in. This is from the history article that I shared with you. But this is a comment from Professor Christy Pujera, I believe it is, who is the head of studies of the University of Wisconsin-Madison. This is an article that was it was summer of 2020. And she made two comments, Rep, that I'd like to have you kind of weigh in on. One is that most of the general public, this is a quote, in the United States, has no understanding of the very long history of slavery in the northern colonies and in the northern states. And then she went on further to say they don't have a sense that slavery was integral to the building of the places like Newport and Providence, that many of these cities had upwards of 20% of their populations enslaved, and that slavery lasted in the North well into the 1840s. So, she's dating, we just talked about the enslavement prior to the Declaration of Independence, right, signing of that, and now she's indicating that almost 100 years after the Declaration of Independence was signed, that there was, that slavery lasted in the North well into the 1840s. And she specifically said, as a professor out of the University of Wisconsin, pointed out Providence and Newport. Comment, please. Any comments?
Everybody outside of Rhode Island knows about it, except those Rhode Islanders that are in denial of it. It was mentioned that individuals are claiming that it's going to erase our history. But in fact, it is our history. It's part of the history. They just don't want to bring it out so that the truth about Rhode Island's history in Newport, Providence, the DeWolfs and Bristol, that they were involved, that slavery took place right here in our cities and towns. When Charles was talking about what was happening, I'm sitting here and I am living some of his words. It was like coming to life. And that is exactly when people hear that word plantation, it brings you back. It brings many of us back to that place by reading and knowing our history, not Black history, American history. It brings you to a time that you don't want to live again. You don't want to go through again, in as much as while we are 2020, we are in a modernized slavery society. We are not enslaved in the manner for which it was back then. But look at our wages. Look at our education. If you compare today and yesterday, you can see that, there are some real similarities with the times as far as slavery is concerned.
Yeah,
but it's a painful situation.
Yeah, and Rep, I want to end with kind of like bringing this up to date. I really want to establish the pre-Revolutionary War, before we signed the Declaration of Independence, before we became a state. There was clearly, a plantation slavery connotation in the state. And I want to read another statement from the article that had to do with the Charlestown Historical Society, which was written and I want Charles and the Rep to weigh in as well. Slave trading and ownership peaked in the colonial period, but after the American Revolution, Rhode Island established itself as an exporter of manufacturing goods, textiles, and slaves. That period between 1780 and 1808, when they also led the North American slave trade. We haven't talked really fully about that, but that is a piece, as the rep says, of our history. And again, I'm not looking for a battle here. I'm just looking to establish certain facts. So when people make the decision on this vote, they that they hear this, they can at least factor that in as they decide whether we should be moving forward or not. But Charles, make comment on the because you're really, especially down in Newport at Bowen's Wharf, you spoke to this issue. But here is 1780 to 1808, clearly after the country was founded, clearly after Rhode Island became a state, and we're showing that Rhode Island is leading the charge relative to North American slave trade.
Well, I know, by the way, Christy Clark Pajaris, the person you were talking about, who wrote the book, and about slavery in Rhode Island. Her and also Joanne Pope Mellish, who really started this even before her. And Roger Williams, you have to realize, he coined Rhode Island as in the 1700s. He coined the word plantation, referring to a new settlement. We're no longer a new settlement, and then the word evolved during the 19th century with the cinema it symbolized the word. It symbolized slavery, a place where was a large farm where Black people and indigenous people were enslaved. So that's the word that you're hearing now as far as slave trade goes, or plantation. I'm trying to stick with the word plantation.
Yep.
And it's important to realize. I read an article recently by our health minister, her name Mrs. Jones, and she had the same feeling I had after I left Warnerland Electra Records. And I left the whole rap business and went into gospel, moved to Rhode Island. I left because the whole connotation of a word, and there was the N word at that time. I had a very good job with the company, but why would I allow a word to deface me, my own person? I've worked in 5 countries. I've seen people be denigrated and subjugated on large farms in Brazil, in Venezuela, in Africa. So I know this word plantation. When I track my own history of my name, the name from Venezuela, because part of my family's history on my father's side came from Caracas and to Jamaica. And that's where the name Roberts, which is a sea captain. I mean, they threw slaves overboard so they could work in the chocolate plantations in Venezuela. If you could swim, you could make it. This is how serious this word is. Words mean something. And as I said, the health minister, Ms. Jones, and I forget her first name, she had the same feeling I had. After traveling through all these countries and seeing and representing the United States and in Peace Corps, in USIS, and then you come home, quit your job, decide to become a park ranger and work for the DEM, and you get your first check, and it says Rhode Island plantation on it. You say, what the heck is wrong with this picture? I've been all the way around the world only to come back and be working for the state as a plantation person. Yeah. No, it did not. I'm telling you, and to be honest with you, I had a chance to really get involved with the DEM. I brought in all the money at Fort Adams, and was working with the jazz festival there. I quit.
Yeah,
I couldn't take the connotation of being, and I was born in Newport on a plantation. I don't think so. Something's wrong with that picture. I don't want to look at myself like that. And I wouldn't want to see other
This is
children.
bigger. This is bigger than that, Charles. And as much as that is real important, it's way bigger than that. And not enough individuals know that story that you're sharing now. And it's unfortunate that many people are closed off to it. For
Yeah, and
one
so
reason or another,
we
closed off.
just got a text saying, we got a lot of other issues to deal with, which I agree with. But I also, I can chew gum and walk at the same time. So I don't dismiss something that should be done. The last piece that I want to just point out, and then I want to get into bringing this to a current discussion, just like Charles just brought it to that point. Many people are hanging their hat on the fact that America's first anti-slavery statute was passed in 1652 in Rhode Island, right? So many people are hanging their hat, but what they're not talking about is the fact that, as we just spelled out, that slavery went well deep into the 1800s, prior to the Civil War, and certainly prior to the establishment and the founding of our country, and continued as we just laid out, 1780, 1808, and beyond. So people are hanging their hat. Oh, Rhode Island passed this legislation that abolished slavery. Yes, it did, but it didn't abolish slavery in the state of Rhode Island. And I wanted to make that point, and I don't know whether you want to weigh in on that, Rep. or Charles, but I think it's a very important point, because in the discussions that I'm having with people, they're saying, oh no, Rhode Island dismissed slavery back in the 1600s, and then again in the early 1700s. Well, the fact of the matter is, we just established that 20% of our population and some of these communities in both post and pre-American Revolution had enslavement in there. So that obviously they didn't, it was a statute or whatever it was that clearly wasn't enforced. And I think that's an important point as we get into discussion. I don't know if you want to weigh in on that, because that's what I'm hearing. I'm hearing, oh, no, Rhode Island is the state that actually established that slavery was not something we wanted to get involved in. The Quakers were, really established that fact. But that's not our history.
It's not all of the history. And individuals that are in denial conveniently select the parts that they want to share, the parts that they're comfortable with talking about. The fact of the matter is, it's a conversation that they need to start getting being comfortable, feeling uncomfortable, because it's an open conversation about accurate facts, true facts. Charles has a lot of the facts. Ray Rickman has a lot of the facts. Keith Stokes has a lot of facts. It's in the libraries. However, it's not being taught in the schools. What's being taught in the school is the make-believe stuff, the stuff that makes other feel good. But we need to incorporate all of it, because all of it is the whole history. It's not what's convenient for some. And that's it's so disingenuous when we talk about it's Black History, it's February. Just think about the N-word. I would love to be able to say it right this moment. Unfortunately, I'm gonna respect everybody that's watching, but we went from the main N-word to Negroes, from Negroes to colored, from colored to Black, from Black to African American. Who did those things? Who changed those things, those names? Obviously, that first one, to somebody, it wasn't sitting well. Even today, if you say it in a public environment, in the General Assembly, it's like, oh my God, oh my God, that is a sin. Is it? Is it really a sin?
Yes,
Why
it
is the name that you called my ancestor, and some still calls each other today, a sin, but slavery is non-existent?
It is a sin.
It is.
Because I'll tell you, when I was in the music business, it's a marketing tool to keep people in a certain position. The word was invented. There's his name was Easton. He and Frederick Douglass also brought it up. Why this word exists? It exists to denigrate a certain group of people by their color. You know, you can
You
be
kind of froze out.
Italian.
I think you need to go back. I think you need to go back and say, because you froze out.
Okay, it's a word that's used. That was created after slaves got there, after the Revolutionary War, where slaves were got their freedom fighting for independence. But just because they got their so-called freedom didn't mean that they weren't enslaved. This is called the institutionalized racism. This is called the institution of slavery. It continued, and we have the facts to prove it, well after it happened. The injustices we have of inequality, economic inequality, were created then because black, if what white people at that time, and it's not a negative thing, it's a character flaw. If you weren't better than a Negro, who are you going to be better than? If they got their freedom, that means that they're equal to me and I'm not free. I have to create a stigma to keep them in place so that I can be better than them, so that I can have more economic advancement than them. So the N word was created and then passed on to generations of other white kids. So when they were talking about their slaves, they were talking about them using the denigration, the N word. And it's gone on and on and on. And in the music business, in the 60s, when I was growing up, they used to use that word as it's like a positive negative.
Yeah.
They
So
use it today. It's
yeah,
not
Well,
60s.
unfortunately, it's become a part of the lexicon of words today. It is wrong to talk about yourself in a negative connotation, just like it's wrong to use the word of a farm where people have been injustices done for 400 years to a mass of people and call it a plantation and justify it. If you're going to take down a statue of the Confederate soldiers, and you're going to talk about how bad that was and what a shame those people are, then why aren't you taking down the statue that's called the Plantation of Rhode Island?
yeah, and so Charles and Rep, we got a few more minutes, but I really want to keep this conversation going as I've made a commitment, for the rest of the time that I'm in office, that we're gonna talk about the issues that you're talking about. We're going to talk about this education and our inability to push back against the system, and there's many people of color that are unwilling to push back against the system that is basically a form of bondage right now, right? So but what I wanted to establish tonight is for people who are watching this, look, as you make up your mind on November 3rd, and I'm going to give both of you the last word here. We still got another 10 minutes, but I wanted to establish that, look, we may have passed, Rhode Island may have been part of, statutes that said, oh, back in the 1600s, we're going to say slavery's not right. But we've shown that there is, 20% of our population was enslaved prior to the American Revolution. And then it continued in terms of the slave trade and having slaves working our farms well into the almost leading up to our Civil War. So I want people to know that, so that they can't dismiss that history as they make up their decision on this first issue and beyond. I mean, this discussion, I give the rep, I want to give two thumbs up for the rep, because you've opened up the ability with this question to have this conversation. And if you didn't put that on the ballot, this conversation is not going to happen, because it's something that is not in the public's eye or in the media's eye. So you bringing this question forward, whether it passes, doesn't pass, you've done something very important. So I want to thank you for that. But I wanted to just establish to the public that's watching this, that have been in somewhat of denial, that there wasn't enslavement in the state of Rhode Island well into the time when Roger Williams was here and beyond, leading up to our Declaration of Independence, and then leading up to our Civil War. It was there, and the fact of the matter is, as you pointed out, that we built, part of our economy, a large part of our economy, on that issue. So you want to debate that? Anybody out there that wants to debate that issue, happy to do that, and happy to bring you on to this forum to debate that one issue. If you want to debate the issue of a name change, happy to have you on to have this open public dialogue. Last words to the rep, and then to Charles, in terms of the case that it makes sense to in this day and age to not be living and especially with the backdrop with some of the things that have happened during COVID, from George Floyd on, and in Rhode Island, not unlike the state of Mississippi, who has now eliminated the Confederate flag as their state flag. They didn't change their name, but they clearly changed their flag. That is a powerful statement as well. And Rhode Island is in a position to do the same thing. That's why I'm encouraging people to support it. Rep, go ahead. Last word to you, and then Charles.
Thank you for giving me the kudos with regards to bringing this conversation up for Rhode Islanders to have a discussion. But Dr. Ruth Simmons brought this conversation up. She opened up the windows, the doors, so that Rhode Islanders could, in fact, enter and start the discussion more than a decade ago. And it was frowned upon. This time, many of those individuals back then that were in denial or against making any change or even talking about it are now talking about it and understand it a lot better than they did before. So it's a lot of people have gotten comfortable being uncomfortable, and they are willing and have been able to have an honest and open conversation about the harm that the word continues to have. We are here and we're supposed to be cohabitating in this state. We are supposed to be one, and we can be. Our flag is the hope flag. But how can you have hope when you have hurt right along with it? So it's a situation that we need to work on, and people need to be open to have that discussion of the fact, the accurate history, the role that Rhode Island played, individuals, the ancestors and individual families that are still prominent right here in the state of Rhode Island. We need to make this change together. And in order for us to do this, we have to be open-minded to do so. Charles brought up some good points. Lieutenant Governor, with all of the research you did, from both sides are very interesting and positive. I'm not discrediting anyone that does not believe or accept. They have a place in this society because that's their way of life. But the reality is there's another side, and that's our side, not ours as African American, but as all of ours. The real true history, Rhode Island history, needs to be told once and for all. And we need to at least unite together and remove that word plantation, and it be a start that we did something together. We are not erasing history. We are making history to add to the past history, and it's in a positive direction.
Thanks, Rep. Charles?
Well, I want to give kudos to our governor for bringing this issue up, and her statement about this issue and bringing it onto the ballot. And I just feel that it's important for us to become one people. When we were Rhode Island and the Plantations, we were two separate organizations. It divided our state into North and South. We're no longer that. We are Rhode Islanders. I'm not a Newporter and the representative of Providence. We're Rhode Islanders. And it's about time that we took the stand to being one people. And we do that by making this statement, by bringing together and eliminating a negative connotation to our state's name. If we're going to not be hypocritical, if we're not going to be those that hide behind the white privilege of being able to say that they are separate and or but equal, if we're going to actually become one group of individuals so that we can look at each other and join together politically, economically, and socially, and to fight all injustice, we have to take a stand. And this is an issue that it's not the word per se that's going to change history. Nothing's going to change if they take the word plantation off the name of Rhode Island. It'll still be Rhode Island. But for people that come to Rhode Island and want to honor our state and honor our history, which is based on the slave trade, well, this is a big statement. It's bigger than any statue you could ever put up. It's a statement that goes across the nation. Look at what Rhode Island has done. Look what Rhode Islanders believe about themselves. They're honoring their history. That's why I put up medallions. It's stories of slavery. And it's not just about the Black people. It's about the slave masters who contributed to it. If they hadn't made that mistake or brought about an issue of economic development through the injustice towards others, there wouldn't be a state of Rhode Island. So we have to embrace all of our history, not just a piece of it, and embrace it in a way that we respect each other and honor ourselves as Rhode Islanders.
Thanks, Charles, and thank you,
I
Rep.
want to also add, just to say, for the record, Governor Raimondo did not bring this issue ever to a ballot at all. So just for the record.
Well,
Rep,
I read one thing in the Providence Journal that the statement that she made that was seemed extremely positive to me.
Yeah. So
yes, that's fine, but it's pandering.
Yeah. So
anyway,
Rep, I know you always speak your mind, but let's not distract it from the issue that where this recognizes our history, Charles and Rep. Just like when the Confederate flag leaves as the state flag in Mississippi, that's still going to be somewhere. That's going to be, this is our history. We need to know the history. The same thing as we outlined today for people. Taking plantation out does not change the history. In fact, we are going to become more aware of it as a direct of the opportunity to make that vote. And I encourage everybody to get out and vote and be educated in terms of the issue, so that you can make a decision on that one question that Rep. Williams has brought forward on the ballot in the Senate as well, on the Senate side. Be educated on it. And the loss of the name is a positive. I consider that a plus, right? The loss is a plus in this situation as we kind of move forward and attack the very things that one of the people said, hey, we got a lot of important things to take care of in this state, and we do. And I'm looking forward to working with both you, Rep, and Charles to really address those, those very important issues that we need to have. That's what's been mentioned, which has the education, economy, and racial justice issues that we need to really work hard on. So, anyways, thank you for being here, Rep. Thank you for being here, Charles. Always a pleasure to talk to both of you.
Thank you, and I appreciate the recognition as a Rhode Islander.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, when I'm going around, and I was in South Kingstown today with helping the small businesses out, I said, look, we're 39 cities in town. Everyone's important. The communities that make up those communities are important, but we are one. We are one state.
People, one voice.
There you go.
That's it.
Okay.
Thanks, guys.
Nice seeing you. Yep. Bye, Charles.
Okay.
Yeah. So I think that enough said there. Be educated on this issue. Make your decision based on, the facts, the data. And as we just explained, there was certainly, for those who didn't understand, dig in. There was slavery here before we became a state. and long after we became a state. 20% of our population at some points in time actually were enslaved in the state of Rhode Island. Let's just recognize it, evaluate it, make your decision. My vote is yes, time to move on. It gives a great positive statement, in my opinion. But again, the history and everything that is good and everything that is, clouded or dark about our history, we need to know about. Good data equals good decisions. Bad data equals bad decisions. So let's, get the good data, make up your mind. But the most important thing, not only here in Rhode Island, but around the country, go out and vote. This is a very important election. And there are important issues that are on this ballot besides this particular thing in terms of the name of the state of Rhode Island going forward. And either way it falls, we need to make sure that it doesn't become a divisive issue. It becomes an issue that we, rally behind one way or the other, up and down. We need to work together and make our state this great place that we all want to live in. So thank you for coming to the community conversation. Please weigh in, and certainly invite you to give your perspective on these issues and any other issues that we're facing in the state right now. Dan McKee, Lieutenant Governor, Community Conversation. Thanks for joining me.